Hi, I'm Kate Bailey. I'm a coach, an author, and a sober mama. And this is Love Sober, the podcast for the sober and sober curious.
You know who made it.
Hi, and welcome back to Love Sober, the podcast for the sober and sober curious. And it's me, Kate. Really delighted to welcome Max today. And yeah, so Max is a mum of two. She's mum of two boys. She's a teacher. She's a member of the Love Sober community. She is a sober sister, and she refers to herself as a Cornish chick trying to acclimatise to Scotland. So, hello, Max. How are you doing today?
Hi, Kate. No, I'm fine. I mean, it's August. I've got a jumper on, but you know, that's Scottish weather for you.
Yeah.
But all good up here.
Yeah, all right, thank you. Well, we were having a little bit of a check-in, weren't we, before we came on, and your kids have gone back to school already, so you're sort of dealing with some of that, and my kids aren't, so I'm dealing with that. So we're like, okay, we're fine. But yeah, it's, I guess, I mean, this segues, I suppose, nicely into what we're going to kind of talk about today, which is the kind of real life of being sober, of being sober moms, of just kind of nuts and bolts of life, right? And we had a little bit of a chat about what podcasts can bring, and I was sort of explaining to Max a bit before about just kind of really wanting to get to the heart of what this thing is. And I've been doing some courses with Anne Dowsett Johnson, who is amazing. She was on here. She's an author. I was doing a memoir writing course. I've been reading some of the works of Sharon Blackie, who is amazing. Dr. Sharon Blackie, who writes a lot about mythology. So yeah, I've been writing quite a lot and thinking about stories. And I was like, you know what? I honestly think that stories are how we make sense of the world and how we feel connected and how we see each other in other people's stories we tell ourselves, stories we tell other people. And it just seems at the heart of a lot of stuff for me. And so I really wanted to focus on this season, just sober stories, and hearing each other in the community, telling our stories and going back to that, like, what's life like for us? What do we find difficult? What do we find brilliant? What do we find challenging? What, you know, all of that, all of the stuff of life, really. So I'm going to welcome Max again. Brought you to the decision to become alcohol free. So could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. Okay. So, well, typically my growing up was typical sort of 80s, 90s, big binge drinking culture where I lived. Quite a small Cornish town, bit of a naval military influence, so a lot of sort of alcocentric environments. So for me, I think I've always grown up with the all or nothing approach to drinking. You drank to get drunk, and for a few years, I think it was just what I considered was the norm. You know, yes, I would have the memory loss, falling asleep, the beer fear, there'd be dramas, falling out and things like that. But I think at that time I was making excuses for it, as it was just the rites of passage of a late teenager, sort of early 20s drinker. And that kind of continued even when I started working. I think it was just the teachers all got together on a Friday. So again, that binge drinking continued over the weekends. And then I took my teaching overseas, and the expat world is quite alcocentric as well. Lots of sort of brunches, all day drinking, and that kind of stayed with me. So I think it became so ingrained. It was just something I always did. As I grew up, I think the drama was less with the drinking. However, it was intense when it did happen. Again, you know, things would kick off. And I suppose it's only now that I am sober, I've realised I actually don't have the emotional capacity to drink. I personally can't do that. I'm far too sensitive. I'm a huge overthinker. And when you add alcohol into that, it's just going to bring chaos and disappointment. This is just for me personally. So when I married and had started my family, it settled down because, you know, I was a mum, I had baby, was breastfeeding as well, so you couldn't drink. So, you know, there was a bit of calm there, but then mummy wine time started, you know, that culture. And again, I talked about this with my husband. It was all innocent to start with, but then it turned into more than an hour. Then it turned into more than a bottle, and that's a lot when you're looking after young children. But what we didn't know then, as the community already do know, my eldest was diagnosed with autism, and we didn't know that at that time. So he was displaying a lot of these traits and going through his own sort of traumas himself. And for me, I started to reward myself with the alcohol, and that's when I felt my drinking got a little bit darker. It sort of became I planned the day around it. I don't think I really noticed it at the time, and I wasn't doing it every day, but my weekends became longer. They started earlier, and then it was like, how much was in the house? Was there enough? If we went to other people's houses, I know I started to like have to, if they didn't have enough of what I drank, I would hide my drink so that, you know, no one else could drink it, because this is mine. I need this. I deserve this. I've had a really bad week, you know. So that still at that time wasn't really alarm bells, but I would, you know, hide the bottles so that maybe my husband didn't see that I'd drunk before he got home from work. Any excuse to have a drink. We would take the kids out for the day, but we would take them to the farm, do all the hands-on parenting, but go to the pub on the way home. It was like that had to come into it. It had to be scheduled in. Getting ready, you'd have your drink getting ready, but then you'd have your drink, a little paper cup of a drink in the car to the train station. It was getting ridiculous, just growing arms and legs. And I think because of what I was going through as a mum, it was like in my head, I was telling myself, I need to make the most of this whilst I can. I have to switch off. I deserve this. I've got, you know, my family live 500 miles away. I don't have the respite. The boys are like 15 months apart, and they're lively boys, you know, they're non-stop rockets. And as I said, with the eldest going through his own struggles, and, you know, I just was using drink to fix that, basically.
I'm sure that lots of people can relate to that. Like when you're talking to me, there's a few things that occurred to me when you were talking. I was thinking about how easy it is it's almost like hop from one alcocentric island to another, isn't it? It's so sort of has been so interwoven, and until you kind of question it and you know, it's like we don't question it because it's kind of everywhere, like you say. It's like expat, it's mummy wine time, it's the teenage rite of passage, you know, and it's so difficult to kind of step back when you're in it to kind of see that there's anything. And it's only in hindsight we're like, oh my goodness, it was like everywhere and I was doing it. But the other thing about, you know, being a mom and it getting parceled up with reward so intimately almost, and that kind of pressure cooker effect of, it's like, you know, I remember starting to plan my day around it, and partly it was like because it was becoming more important, because that was like literally I can't get out to do yoga, I can't do this, can't do that, so it's going to be that glass of wine, so it's got more of a focus. But also I have to plan it because I've got to plan meal times, I've got to plan bedtimes, I've got a schedule. So you've got this weird almost sort of set of circumstances and environment that's priming us for sort of like problematic use almost. So it's really like the wheels are very well oiled, aren't they, at that point?
As well, I was always prepared. It was like everything was up to date. I was like giving myself the permission to do it, because I was still being a good mum in my head. I was still, you know, the children were clean, the laundry was done, the house was up to date, the meals were cooked. So now I can think 2 bottles of Prosecco, and if it the next day is a write-off, it doesn't matter, because I'm organised, I'm functioning. You know, it was like I was still telling myself, you're okay, you can do this, it's fine, it's normal, this is normal, even though it was not at all.
Yeah, and the boundaries are so, it's weird, isn't it? You're just reminding me, I've got one memory, and I might have talked about this on the podcast, but it was still in my drinking days, and one of the darkest times, where I had a friend's, an ex-colleague's funeral to go to. Unfortunately, she died very young. And it was very difficult for me to ever get away, because my husband worked away in London. We haven't got family, you know, nearby. It was always very difficult to kind of plan this, but I knew I had to go to this thing. So the night before, my friend came over. I drank, you know, a good bottle and a half of red wine. I stayed up too late. This is knowing that I was going to have to drive all the way around the North Circular to London to a funeral. But I was like, but I've got to do the biscuits. Like, I can't even remember what it was. It was for some school thing. I hadn't done the biscuits because I've been sitting drinking. So I've got to do the biscuits. I've got to clean up the house. Got to make sure this is done. I couldn't cancel my friend. You know, what I should have done, what I would do now is I would just, like, if I had something like that, I would cancel everything so that I got a good night's sleep and I was able to. But I had no idea of boundaries or self-care, or even my capacity almost.
Yeah, I think yeah, I mean, this whole sort of becoming sober has opened my eyes to everything. Like, I really wasn't living, you know, under that cloud of alcohol. I was just getting along, you know, making it through the day, basically.
Yeah. And so what actually was stopping? What made you stop in the end?
So in fact, it was a colleague that I think in my head, I knew I was always, you know, always worrying about who I'd hurt, and I knew that this was damaging those closest to me. I was putting a strain on my relationship with my husband, with my own children, with my parents, and my sister and her children, and that's my world to me, like right now, like that's all that matters in my life. And I just knew, I think it was a Christmas, my parents had come to have Christmas, and I would have drunk a lot, and I think I was very aware that they were aware, but they would never say anything. Dad would always be like, three's the crowd, you know. I think he would drop the hints, but again, I think it was for me to find out for myself. But it was New Year's Day 2020. I woke up alone. David and I knew, I knew because he wasn't there in the bedroom, we'd had a fight. So he wasn't in the room. And you're sitting there with all the fear, all the anxiety, you're crippled, like, with every horrible emotion. And I just went down the stairs, and I'd said to David then, I can't do this anymore. And I just burst into tears. And instead of berating me like he probably had done in the past, he just said, I know. So what are we going to do about it? And he said we, which made me feel instantly like, okay, I have to take this step. A colleague in my work had approached me because she'd watched her own mum drink growing up, and she could see the pain that I was in. And she just said, Max, I don't want your boys to grow up having that memory of you. And so between that and sort of my husband, that pushed me to make that step. It was I mean, I've done a lot in my life, you know. My friends always take the mick out of me because I'm all like, when I was in Bahrain and all that, I've always been brave. I've always like, yeah, I can get on a plane round to the other side of the world and live, and I can do it. I can jump off that. I'll do that. But this was the hardest step because I didn't know life without it. I didn't know how you lived without alcohol. I don't, you know, but I just knew if I didn't, I wouldn't my family wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be together. So that's worth more than a bottle of fizz, you know?
Yeah. And so what happened? So that morning he said, okay, what are we going to do? So what was the process?
Day, I think I ate. I just comfort ate because I was hungover anyway. And just I watched like Harry Potter movies back to back. I can remember it, just feeling so sorry for myself, just really horribly sorry for myself. And then I downloaded the sober, I am sober app, the counting the day app. And I didn't really know what else to do. I had a book, I think it was the Sober Revolution book, and that colleague had recommended. And I just went walking. I think I just walked and walked and walked. Whenever I felt a trigger or felt, I just went out and I played like all those cheesy like Eye of the Tiger songs, like I Will Survive.
Fighter ones, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like Wilson Phillips, I remember being Hold On, like just out in the streets, just, I'm going to do this. And then, but I wasn't educated in as I am now, thanks to you guys, like Love Sober, like opened my eyes. But initially it was the count. So for the first year, with lockdown thrown in, as a teacher, remote learning, didn't have a clue what I was doing. Homeschooling, didn't have a clue what I was doing. Plus a child with, neurodiverse needs. That was, falling off the sober path. But luckily Scotland had a bit of good weather that year. So a bit of sunshine kept me going. Yeah. Might have gone out more than once a day. But, we got through it. In fact, I said lockdown for us was amazing in the end, because not only was I growing myself with this newfound sobriety, but we were just doing things that families should be doing that I avoided doing because I just was all so selfishly like, what have I been through today? Woe is me. I need this drink. Go away, to the kids all the time. Whereas now it's like, what are we all doing? We need to be together. It's night and day. So the first year was just getting to the year. I'm a bit all or nothing in everything. So it was the count was really important. But when I was approaching the year, I was like, what do you do now? And that's when I Love Sober. It was in December that I joined a peer support, and you've not shut me up ever since, because it was like I'd started attending all the weekly ones, and then Life School came up, which was just 12 weeks of just born again, I think. Well, yourself, because we fed back to you every week, and I was just like, wow, what I just learned to love life. And it sounds really cheesy, really, really cheesy, but just going for a walk at 5 o'clock in the morning and watching the deer walk through the fields, or the sun rising, or as the community, my sparkle was the paddle board, finding my thing. And my sparkle was, much to David's probably financial sort of like annoyance, investing in a really good paddle board.
Amazing.
And, getting out on the water, being near the water, it just who knew that that's all it needed? Those simple, small things. And just freedom to plan the day as it unfolds. I'm quite controlling. I know that in a lot of areas of my life, but now it's like, what are we doing this weekend? It doesn't matter. Whereas before it had to be, we're going to go there, then the pub. We're going to do that, then we're going to go to friends, and there's going to be alcohol. It all had to be around that. Whereas now it's like we can get in the car, we can go to the coast and not come back till 9, 10 o'clock at night, and I can drive and it's fine. It's just a world. It's a different world.
Yeah, and I always think that thing about when people are trying to moderate, and this idea that that's going to be the holy grail somehow, and actually they don't realise that actually what you get is freedom.
Yeah, I mean, moderate, I don't even know what that means. I can't even, not in my vocabulary.
To be fair, no.
Even back in, when I used to drink, people say, do you want to go for a coffee? Well, why? Why? Whereas now I love going for coffee, and I love, let's go to that place because they've got amazing cakes. Who'd have thought I'd be so excited about going for a cup of coffee? But back then it was like, unless we're going for a drink, I don't think we can have a friendship. Like, that was the mindset.
Yeah. And what was I going to say? Sorry, I've had my son's come in and put the kettle on, so I'm hoping that you can hear me and everyone can hear. So might be a bit of editing, but we might be all right. So in terms of like that first year, because you said, as soon as you got that, like on that day one, it was like, right, was that get to a year at that point? That was your goal?
Yeah, that was my goal. There was, and I brought this up on peer support before, I remember for the sort of first 3 to 4 months, every Friday between 3 and 6, I had huge wobbles. Like, I couldn't cope. It was as if my body was so ingrained with that Friday wine time drinking from 3 p.m. It was as if I wanted to scratch my skin off, because I just had to be. Initially, I'd just scream and cry and stamp my feet at David, because he was like my outlet for trying to get past these sort of hurdles initially. And then suddenly one Friday, it just didn't happen anymore. It just stopped happening. And I think it took about 3 to 4 months.
Yeah.
But I can only describe it as if maybe it's how because I never really thought I was addicted to alcohol, but clearly I must have been in some shape or form, because that's how it was like, I think, how addiction must feel when you need to stop.
Yeah, and there are, there's that data around that time, 3 months being a kind of a significant turning point for sure. The brain chemistry, the rewiring stuff that goes on, and what we didn't realize, I remember talking to Mandy about this, but it was a real eye-opener, because both of us went back to drinking at the year point. And what we didn't realize was there's a real bit of rewiring and a dopamine drop that happens just before that year point, which is so many people, we don't know about that. So if we kind of, I suppose, if we know about it, and that's that education piece, isn't it? That we can go, oh, okay, this, because otherwise we tell ourselves stories about it. And it's very personalized, isn't it? And then rather than going, oh, right, okay, that's just, part of what the brain does around that time, you're like, oh, fine, I'll just go do something else for like 24 hours or something.
Yeah, my head, and it was fine. It will just go away.
So that's amazing that so you were all right, but that was like really deeply ingrained, that Friday feeling kind of thing. And then, so so the rest of it, how was that?
So I think the advantage of lockdown was not having to see people, and nothing was open. So I remember we talked about that a lot on peer support, because when things started to open up, we all started to get a little bit wobbly, because we were quite nervous about socializing. And I think for me, I just had to be prepared. I had to sort of, right, okay, so if I feel triggered, if we're out and about and we're in a pub or we're going to friends, I was very much clear on what I needed to do. I would say to some friends, right, I'm leaving now. I'm going to go home, put on my pajamas, have a cup of tea, get a bit of whole nut, watch the telly, and I'm going to come back and pick David up and the boys up in an hour. So that I'm letting them have longer, because my social window is like an hour and a half, and then I'm done, and I never knew that. I always thought I needed to be around people all the time. But now I don't really, I quite like just a bit quiet now, which is quite a surprise. So I think it was a bit of planning initially. It was kind of like, well, you know what, I was trying to be kind to myself, trying to learn about boundaries and say, look, I'll come to this part, but then I'm going to go.
Yeah.
And that's only come with sort of confidence and strength, because the thing that I found difficult to navigate was my relationships with friends and my social life, because it was quite alcocentric, what I'd been doing. So it was trying to find middle ground with that, so that I didn't want anybody around me to feel they couldn't drink around me. I've got no issue with that. But at the same time, I didn't want to sit and listen to your nonsense 3 times over 6 hours later, because I've got other things to go and do. So, you know, I had to be, it's trying to find the balance. And with some friends, it's worked out brilliantly and they're respectful of that. And, you know, we do lunches, they carry on drinking and I get the train home or what have you. And it's fine. But I have found that some friendships maybe have had to be put to the side because it was maybe suited that purpose back then, and it doesn't really, you know, suit my lifestyle choices now. And again, hopefully accepting that that's okay, and they accept that that's okay, and it's all, you know, you separate nice and easily, and it's, you know, but I think that just come with learning. That's just, you know, because I'm quite sensitive and an overthinker, that's taken a long time to get there, but I'm getting there now. You know,
it's interesting, isn't it, how we can have that idea of ourselves as very social, and actually once we take out the alcohol out of the equation, it's like, I guess it doesn't mean that we're not social, but that the idea of what social looks like and what our preferences and capacity are changes. And you don't know that, do you, when you're drinking? Because you drink to sort of numb all the edges, and when that uncomfortable feeling of like, I've had enough, it's like, well, I'll just have another drink then, and so it's like and when you're saying, it's just sort of taking me back and thinking how much fear there is, you know, in the early days. There's such a lot of fear that everything will be ruined, and that no one will like, well, I'm speaking for myself, no one will like me, I'll be boring, we'll have nothing in common. You know, it's like I sold a lot of things short, didn't see the value in certain people who might have been quieter but would just always be there. Whereas someone who was gobby, who actually isn't there for me now, you know, or maybe they were fun, but actually they're not actually who I might choose as a sort of a friend now. It's interesting that, how much fear there is at the beginning. And what I love about what you're saying, what I love about hearing your story, is that all the hope in it, you know, that I can imagine people starting out would go, I don't know what it looks like, but okay, it might be okay. You know,
I think as well it's important that, you know, you just because you perhaps stop, it doesn't mean everything gets fixed. You know, like, it's not like a light goes on and life's perfect. You know, everything that I was finding challenging still remains, but I'm dealing with it and approaching it in a much better way. You know, something that I'm trying to forgive myself on is that I was quite dismissive of the boys on a Friday, on a Saturday, because it'd been a full-on week. And what I didn't realise with Archie in particular, when he was perhaps in my head hassling me, he needed me, quite frankly. He was in his own heightened state and he needed me, and I was dismissive. And whilst I'm quite ashamed of that now, still, I know now I am 100% there for him, like in every wobble, in every moment. And as we were saying before, like, some days I deal with it like a champion. Some days I deal with it like, oh, check me, look at that gentle parenting approach that I've just done. Ticked all the boxes. And then some days I might throw stuff and there might be a few choice words and it's not my finest moment, but I have to forgive myself because, you know, and me and Arch work through it together. But he knows I'm there. He knows that, and that, you know, is God worth so much more than having a drink.
Yeah. Like you say, you're kind of that thing about not being a perfect parent, but it means that you don't go absent whilst still being in the same room. I think that's the thing that's very confusing for, and I know that I used to do that for sure, because I used to just kind of go, actually, what you're saying as well, I think before, it was about the socializing, about respecting our own, honoring our own sensory needs and capacities. But actually, most of us, we haven't got a bloody clue how to do that. We don't know that oh, it's absolutely fine, and actually, you know, I need my own 5 minute, I need my own like time out now, you know. And I know that, you know, in the past, I mean, my husband's great now, but he used sort of like used to make jokes about how like what a child I am. And it's like, well, actually, no, what I realize now is I'm neurodivergent. Like I have sensory needs. No, I can't listen to you and you at the same time, and if the radio's on, I'm going to have a meltdown. I've got three things going on. I'll be like that. I'll be literally twitching and kind of letting myself stim under the table. Do you know what I mean? I had no idea about that. And I love what you said also about working through it with Archie. So they get that sense of reparation and process and learning and growth, and it's like, we don't have to be perfect. And many of us thought we did while we were drinking.
Yeah.
Isn't it? It's such, and I like, you know, and I think it is really important that we also have those, that it's not, because I definitely felt that if I stopped drinking, like, because it was such a big thing, that I was like, okay, if I stop drinking, like, things will be perfect. Like, I literally will lose a stone. I'll be like, literally, I remember a blog I wrote 3 weeks into my sober journey, the first time around, and it was like, why don't I look like Gwyneth Paltrow yet? And I was like, I literally was quite annoyed. And I see that actually on sober forums, that kind of sort of feeling like we've built up, and it's almost like that, okay, this is such a big thing to give up, I've got to get a really big thing back. It's got to be worth it. So you kind of raise the stakes on yourself, don't you? And I think that evens out as you go through. You get that overarching well-being sense of peace and security and some more serenity. And it isn't about those like quick wins. I know for me, that was a definite learning.
I think also, I mean, I just replaced it with a lot of sugar to start with, so there was no chance.
Oh, me too.
Model at any point, but do you know what does come back? It's the eyes. I think it's in the eyes, isn't it? I mean, aside from all the physical sort of the stuff that really, you know, it doesn't matter so much, but I think it's the spark comes back in your eyes and in your. This is going to sound so cheesy, but like your soul, do you know what I mean? Like I don't know. I feel I've got more drive now than I've ever had. That's what's come back, because, well, number one, you gain so much time because, you know, you're not wasting it sort of crumpled in a heap on your sofa watching Netflix, stuffing your face with a pizza. But, you know, you've just got all this time on your hands, and you take up new hobbies, you know, like things that you'd never thought you'd ever do or ever thought you'd like, you know. And then the people, you know, it all just grows. It just, I don't know, I just feel like becoming sober for me has just opened up more doors than I thought it ever could.
Yeah I think in the beginning, I think, you know, we all say that when towards the end of the drinking days, it can feel very, very narrow, and it can get very narrow. And then I was like, well, I wanted it to be really wide straight away, and it wasn't for me. It's like I had to just do the day in, day out. I did have to do all the sugar and the Netflix, just getting, you know, you've mentioned as well, haven't you, like you said we quite a lot, the sober community, so building out your sober community has been big.
Place where no one else is not drinking, it's difficult, isn't it? You feel like you're the only one, so you can, you know, that's, you know, the ladies in Love Sober, you know, some of them, you know, they become more than just a person in a Facebook group. They become friends. You become your own little family. It's amazing. I mean, obviously I'm still waiting for the big Love Sober paddleboard reunion that we're making happen.
Let's do that then. Has Bali got anything?
Oh yeah, we did mention Bali once, didn't we? Yeah, I've been there, Kate.
You could do. You've done the recce for us. Yeah.
But yeah, I think I mean, I'm still working on so much, you know, like there's still the overwhelm, the anxiety, but it's feeling every real raw emotions, I think, for me. I remember once, it was a simple little thing. We went for dinner. It was my husband's birthday, and I was just watching the boys with their dad, looking at football YouTube video, ultimate goals, and I actually cried, but with joy. Just, it was just us. It was the Smiths against the world, and it was just perfection right there. A simple thing like that. I didn't need any more than that. And I think I'd spent so long just numbing everything out and just letting myself being sucked under this grey cloud, and not, you know, every day has a grey cloud. I've no doubt, but it's what you do with it. You know, it's what you decide to do. You can either choose to just sit under that, or you can choose to try and find. Listen to me with my little analogy.
Love it.
Find the sun trying to get through. It doesn't happen up here, but you know, that's what you can choose to do. And that, for me at the moment, is a big learning for me is what I choose to do with my reaction to things, or how I deal with things is my biggest learning for me at the moment. That's where I'm at.
I can really relate to that, and I think that's absolutely changed with me with sobriety. And also I'd say some things like yoga, like, you know, we talk about, like, maybe you've done your paddle boarding and find ways to change your state, relax, self-soothe. And once you can start to work with that and find agency, and it's a regular thing, I think that our brains become adaptive again, and they become, flexible. We have a flexibility and greater bandwidth. And it was like all of those things. I had no idea. I just thought I'd not have the hangover and feel quite so shit about myself. Oh, apart from looking like Gwyneth Paltrow. I had no idea that there was all this stuff that would feel easy. It's almost like they say, oh God, I am going to be a yoga ball. But my yoga teacher sort of says, you know, you do, like, the reason we practice yoga is not so we can be good at yoga, it's so we can be good at life. And I feel the same about sobriety. It's not so that we don't drink alcohol, it's so that we can enjoy and be better at our lives, and our lives can be better for us, you know.
And I feel like people, you know, the drink's always around me, and I think that's brilliant if you can have a drink and you're fine and you can, you know, but I just can't. And this is something I was talking about with my husband earlier. It's just my nervous system or nervous regulator cannot cope with that coming into play, because there's too much going on there already. So it's just too much. And it took me 30 years to realize that, you know, and I just, it's that. So I know that I can't cope. I've resigned to the fact that I think once you just know that, you just close the book on it. And my family, my husband and my boys foremost, my immediate family, I won't risk anything to jeopardize that. And that, bottom line.
So in a sense, you're because I was going to say to you, you know, what would be your your advice to people really starting out, or if they're struggling, and just to reflect back on that is like you found your two whys, right, haven't you? You've got your why, which is your reason, your raison d'etre, which is your family, husband and boys, but also another big why is actually my nervous system is dysregulated enough, and that's just the worst kind of thing that I could put into it.
It's so what that fuel to the fire.
Exactly. And we're not taught that. We're told that it's the right tool for the fire, and often it isn't for people, you know. But what would be your advice or your tips and tools for people?
I mean, it whilst it's the scariest steps you'll make, you won't regret it. I heard this quote. This is going to sound so stupid, but I was watching Towie. I do love my reality shows, and it was The Only Way is Essex. And this person said, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're going to get what you get, which is so true.
Yeah.
That you get some words of wisdom. And I was just thinking, if you keep approaching things in that way, or you're going to get the same result every time, and only you can change it. Down to you to change it. Again, I think it's all this big thing, this choice. I had to make that step. It was only me that could do that. My husband couldn't make me do that. My dad couldn't make me do that. It was me that had to do that. And once you've done that, there's no looking back. It's hard, but everything's hard. But which hard do you want? Do you want to keep drinking and for it to still be hard? Or do you want to change it? And whilst it's hard, it's going to be different. It's going to be exciting. And I think that's important. Which do you want?
Yeah.
And that's why I've decided sobriety, as hard as it can be, it gets easier. It does get easier. I know people say, oh yeah, it's all right for you, you got all that time under your belt, but I never did have that time under my belt. I had to still work at it, and I still do now. I still feel like I'm walking along a cliff path, and if I veer too far to the, there's no room for complacency. You've got to keep at it. You've got to still put the work in. But the rewards are greater. They're greater than any more time spent drinking.
Oh, I love that. And in terms of sort of what the work looks like for you on a daily basis, what would that look like?
I get out. I have to move. I get up early before the house gets up, because as you know yourself, with a child, that you never know what your day is going to start like. So I have to preempt that it might start a little bit chaotic. So I get up early and have my time. So that's my first hour, 2 hours of self-care. And that's in the shape of a walk, a run, noticing nature and just quiet. Or I go meet with a friend and we just talk a lot of nonsense and it's lovely. That's the absolute. And then I suppose you get on with your day. And, I think self-care for me, I do reward myself a little bit too much with chocolate, so that's probably not the best. I'm no good in a bath because I can't sit still, so again I might even walk or run later. I'm a bit of a on the go person. Remember we did this, and I'm not very good at the breathing and the writing and the journaling, but I just love, I don't know, just being out with the elements.
Yeah, and it's so great that you found what works for you.
Yeah, and the odd podcast as well. I like listening to, Love Sober. I do my Sober Daves. Love listening to him. The Australian girl, the Sober Awkward. Like just whatever. Just because, like you, I love listening to other people's stories because I feel at some you can relate, to them. And it just gives me that, I'm not alone.
Yeah.
Just me.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Max. It's been so lovely to talk to you. It's been amazing. So, we always, you finish with, what's your reason to love sober today?
And I have written that down.
Well done.
Freedom. The freedom it gives me on all levels. Just, that's why I love being sober.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you and to spend a bit more time with you. And and I'm sure that people listening in, there's just so much to relate to, and thank you for being honest and also keeping it real, just as you always do. I love the fact that you keep it real. So thank you very much.
Okay, and anyone else that's listening, love sober's the way forward.
Oh, that's why we've That's why we've decided to have you on for the first episode, so you could plug Love Sober.
Yeah.
Joking. All right, so if you're immediately concerned about your drinking, do reach out, send up a flare. You can get in touch with me at hello@lovesober.com. Finding a community that works for you, and like as Max said, you know, she's a member of the Love Sober community, and but yeah, it is the main thing. The main message here is I guess just don't feel alone. Just find your fit, and yeah, we'll see you next week.